is to review and approve the minutes from our November meeting. Did everyone have a chance to look at them? Are there any comments or changes? All right, there being none, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm abstaining.
Kathy was not in attendance, she will abstain. So the minutes are approved. Next up, review and sign bills. Chris, are there any bills?
No bills tonight.
I wish I could say that at home. It's the most wonderful time of the year.
You're looking for some, I have.
So the next is the project eligibility request. Hopefully everyone saw the communication from Chris late last week that there were a couple of the eligibility requests that we have seen, but they'd like us not to discuss or make a determination of eligibility as of yet, because they are discussing at various departments which applications they want to put forward and make sure that they have all their priorities identified before we see those. But we do have the District 5 Schoolhouse Phase 2. If there is a copy in the drive, or do we have any hard copies if anyone needs it? We might have some.
I can print some off if needed.
I couldn't find it in the drive.
Wow.
I looked, but
See it.
See, how do I do this?
Does everyone want a hard copy to review?
Pardon me?
Yes. All nine.
or put it up on the
Or,
screen.
yeah, or put it up at, or in the drive, because I couldn't find it either.
It's, yeah, it should be in the meeting folder. Just meetings 2023.
Mm-hmm. 12.4.
Yeah, 12.4.
There's a report and catalog,
Yeah, I saw that. That's what-
technical preservation,
If you go to the project eligibility requests.
no.
Would it make sense, in light of there is a report from the, just on the District 5 Schoolhouse project, that perhaps hear that report or go over that report first, since that is leading towards the eligibility request for their next request? Oh, would you like to share that, Gail? Do you have their report? Would you like to speak to the report?
Well, I don't know that I can speak to it, but it's pretty extensive. Chris can probably.
Chris?
Yeah, what I'll
speak
do is
better
I'll
to
pull up some of
this
the
stuff, you know, I don't
materials
wanna
here.
Speak out of turn.
Yeah, so so this is the District 5 Schoolhouse Report. So this is part of that assessment and accessibility that was approved. The project is complete at this time. They provided the final report. Also in the folder is some additional kind of background documentation, but really this kind of overview of the project and action plan is the main kind of product, if you will, that that's been provided. Let me just zoom in a little bit, make that a slightly more legible. Is that? There we go. So they run through an overview of the project, overview of the standards that they used for determining compliance. Again, this is basically mainly looking at ADA accessibility for the District 5 schoolhouse. And then they detail the action plan and a number of projects that they're recommending be taken in terms of providing for the accessibility. A lot of that includes significant accessibility issues in terms of the walkway. They have the kind of mossy stone steps which would not be ADA accessible. Some of the pitches and grades, as well as the entrance door, and some of that. So they do show kind of the existing conditions of the site and that analysis. But then again, kind of going through here is really the, for lack of a better term, the kind of punch list of projects that would be recommended in terms of addressing slopes, handrails, and other similar features that are missing for ADA accessibility. I'm not going to go through each of those, and I'm sorry with zoomed in why this is all. Let me see if I can zoom in through. Nope. Maybe Google Docs will let me do it that way. That's a bit better. Formatting is not going to work on that way. Kind of zooming out, so I know this might not be legible on the screens here, but it just kind of goes through a number of projects that they detail for each of these in terms of access, signage, and best practices for the vestibule, passenger loading zone, and the stairway. This list of projects to be considered then forms the basis for the Phase 2 request that we'll be reviewing for eligibility tonight, looking at evaluating each of those and the feasibility of developing each of those in a way that preserves and enhances the historic nature of the site.
Does anyone have any questions of what Chris just shared or any comments? So going back to, yes.
I do. And I'm not sure if this was extra information that was added, but in the drive, there's a document referencing technical preservation guidelines for windows. And to my understanding, there's no window project in this considered here. So I'm just wondering if that was just extra documentation that was provided. Just want to make sure it's not part of the scope of the project. If I'm missing something here, and I believe that is the case.
Yeah, I believe that's the case. It's probably additional information in terms of if they did, if they were going to propose window work, those are the standards, and it's probably attached to the standards that they're looking at in terms of the preservation materials. But again, I mean, we can go through each of those projects that they were looking at, and certainly when we do the full application, rather than just the eligibility, we can kind of, further refine that scope to make sure that that's, either within or not included. So
I seem to recall hearing or reading that they had done the windows at some previous time. That those windows are not original,
okay,
so.
Yeah, I actually,
so that may be
I think it just
that may be part of
clear
related
that
to that.
eligibility doesn't have, there's no, so it's extra document. That's all right. Can I keep going?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I think the scope of the effort to get the feasibility, the assessment for ADA was pretty thorough. It looks like it jives with the other assessments that have been done throughout other town properties. I know we've seen, maybe some of us members would have already seen this for other buildings. Certainly didn't come to CPC, but just as involved citizens. So I think that that project came to a good completion in terms of the ADA review. The next thing that comes to my mind is that feasibility piece of it, and I would say, I look at that and I say, all right, these are a bunch of recommendations. How does the society decide what is a recommendation that they're going to move forward with, and what's one that they're going to just say, all right, we'll put a warning sign that says when there's a low clearance. I'll give it a good example. One of the items in the punch list was that the ceiling height was 1.5 inches off from standard. So is it really worth this the effort to lower the floor for 1.5 inches, like how much is that gonna cost, right? Is that gonna be a breaker that, well, if we can't lower the floor, then we're not gonna do the ultimate expectation, which is that this building becomes open to the public. So I think it's just, I think that's a question back to the society, about where are they seeing, how far are they willing to go with this? And maybe the feasibility has to be completed as well to understand what those numbers are gonna be. But thinking for myself that, this cycle, the next cycle after this, about those costs is, I would hope that the society would look at, all right, there are certain things that we as an organization would like to make sure that happen. Some things, is it possible to move forward with opening the building to the public by implementing a workaround for X number of pieces that are called out in ADA compliance? Some of them are, obvious like the thresholds and ramps and regrading and surface area for parking, because there's basically no parking, right? It's no brainer. Something that comes to my mind is when I look at the picture that showed the interior space, the interior doorway, I think it was 27, I think the report said it was 27 inches and it should be 32. Mm-hmm. The picture is pretty zoomed out, but to get that 5 inches, it's really close to the chalkboards. So is that going to be at risk for damage by implementing a change to get up to 32 inches? So those are the kind of things that I would be concerned about, because you weigh in like historical preservation versus ADA compliance. Right. And that's the kind of thing that and I know the documentation is all there that says, to weigh that thing, but that's something will be in my mind concern as we get into the next phase after the feasibility. So this is just more dialogue that I'm sharing with the committee, right, as we consider this phase, and hopefully there'll be further phases. But I think it's worthwhile to continue with this application for the feasibility, just to understand how much it's going to cost to do these things, and whether it's possible to even do it without messing with the historic preservation side of it.
I have a question. Apparently, maybe I'm reading this wrong, but the idea of having a drop-off and pickup area, is that like a little parking spot right next to the building or near the street, or do you have any idea what they had in mind there?
I'd probably want them to speak more specifically to that during the application round, but.
I mean, would it be on Main Street or would it be on Old Mill?
Again, I'm not specifically sure if that would be.
You guys have any ideas about this?
Well, there is a little drive there. It could be on the property. It doesn't have to be on the street. There's a drive that comes in, a little parking area in the corner. But that's all part of the feasibility, I suppose. See how it works.
True, but then you still would have to back out onto Old Mill Road. I mean, that, obviously, I live in that area, so I probably drive it more than anybody, but I'm sure everybody has driven. And that's a very, very busy intersection, so even to stop there to offload somebody blocks the lane of traffic unless they do pull off. I mean, and you block, if you're on Old Mill, you blocking that'll eat up the intersection even for a 1 minute stop. Because people come in to make the turn can't, and then it just, everybody's gotta come to a stop while something's being offloaded.
I thought that would be the worst thing that we had to worry about, to tell you the truth.
Well, for those of you that don't have the eligibility determination request in front of you, they are asking for funding for a feasibility study that'll evaluate each recommendation with the intent of compliance, and they specifically call out the feasibility study should be conducted to explore the possibility of providing an exterior access route or ramp that will go along the west and south sides of the schoolhouse. The study shall explore the possibility of providing an accessible entrance. The study will be needed to determine whether it is technically feasible to bring the vertical clearance of the interior access route into full compliance, and a determination should be made as to whether it is technically feasible to bring the vestibule door into full compliance. So we certainly could, that's what they hope to cover in a feasibility study. Our final judgment today is whether or not this project, as described, is eligible for a full application to be submitted for our consideration. We can render that decision yes or no with some questions to ask them to please be sure to elaborate in their application, tell us more fully about, it's possible they don't have answers, and that's what they want the feasibility study to tell them. What can they do about parking? What can they do about a pullout? But I think it's entirely appropriate, should we decide that this is an eligible project, to ask them to please try to answer, if you can, if it will look into those questions, or whether or not they already have an answer. So, is there anything else in the application that anybody doesn't have right in front of them that you want called out or read, or?
I guess from the application, I guess, I mean, the document that was just up there, I saw that online and, trying to read through it and understand it. But when you talk the application, you're talking the actual form, because
That-
I couldn't find that online.
So can you bring that up again, please, Chris?
That was.
This
that's
form,
not-
the only form they have submitted at this point is this eligibility determination. It is
That
up to
report.
us, yes. It is up to us to decide if funding for a feasibility study to build upon the accessibility study is an appropriate, allowable use of CPC funds. It's not a determination of whether or not we'll fund it, but it's an invitation to submit the full application. So if you saw that one that Chris just put up, then you've seen all that we have so far.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Then that's fine, because I was thinking that I don't have, the form itself, the application, I thought was there somewhere.
Just the eligibility has been submitted.
That's,
believe
yeah,
Chris
the
showed
thing
that.
he's
Not
putting
this-
up
You
there.
haven't missed anything.
Yeah, see, that, I was looking for that and couldn't find it, but I guess that wasn't there is what you're saying.
Yes, that's there, the project eligibility.
No, I couldn't find that, but. I
It's in a
found the other-
different folder, which
found
I
the
couldn't
other
find it this
document.
morning, but I just found it now.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I've got it.
there's so much information to go through, but.
Would you like a moment that Chris could just scroll through it and you could take a look?
Well, I can't see it from here.
Tell you what, let me pass my
gonna blow it
iPad down.
That's all right. I don't want to hold the place up. I don't want to hold it up.
Well, it's basically, it seems like that what we paid for last time was an assessment of building. And this, now they want a feasibility study, now that they know what the problems are. So we're still not at the point of actually doing any work.
Oh, yeah.
What, again, I wasn't here last time, so what, I thought we paid for like some air
We
conditioning?
paid for a study.
That was the other
That's the
building.
other schoolhouse.
Oh,
That's,
okay.
on the common.
Ah,
This one is the old mill one.
I knew this was the old mill one, so we haven't done any funding for this building at all at this point.
We funded a study that report we were just looking at that told us about the accessibility issues.
Okay,
The report identifies
That's the refund.
the deficiencies in the building in terms of accessibility, what's not wide enough, someone
okay.
with mobility issues would not be able to get to. And what they're asking now is if they might submit an application to then go forward with a feasibility study, which I assume would include some structural assessment of whether or not it's physically possible to create the accessible entrances and walkthroughs that were described in the first study. The studies are an allowable use of community preservation funds if they are studies that are leading towards historic preservation. That's,
okay. Yeah, I guess, is making the building ADA compliant a preservation of the building? Or is it just so people can come and see the building?
Oh, okay.
go right ahead.
Okay. All right, so I think I'll use a technical piece to come along with it. So if you scroll up, please, Chris, to where the checkboxes are, and we just stop there. All right, so I'm gonna use this as the way to describe this part. And I disagree with the 2 checkboxes here, so I would change, I'm gonna say that should be changed, but it doesn't need to be resubmitted, just a point of clarification. So you were describing, if it was to preserve the building from further harm and damage, it would be, preservation would be the checkbox. When it comes to rehabilitating or restoring a historic asset to be ADA compliant, that's gonna be the second checkbox in the bottom, the rehabilitate and restore. So this project is technically, should only be that bottom checkbox, because the exercise here is that this is already a historic asset. The idea is to rehabilitate it so that it can become ADA compliant. To get to that point, the society has requested for last year's project was to, which we now see what's been completed with the report that says, these are the things that are not ADA compliant. The eligibility request here is to say, okay, now that we know what's not compliant, what's the feasibility to actually do those things? Then the third bite of the apple is gonna be, I'm hoping, it comes down the pike for next cycle is, all right, these are things we wanna move forward with to change, and this is the amount of money we need to do that. So, in my perspective, I think this is a rehabilitate and restore project. It is compliant, it is CPA allowable use, because it's in that checkbox. It calls out in the legislation ADA compliance. And then we've also identified this as a need in our community, in our community preservation goals, in terms of making historic buildings ADA compliant. So to me, it checks all the boxes in terms of like, yeah, this project should move forward. It is eligible.
Is it feasible within the space that's there?
That's what this study they're asking for would determine.
The feasibility part?
Yeah, the first study
Yep.
pointed out the deficiencies. This study will tell us whether or not it's actually possible to do it.
Okay.
We have no information on what this study is going to cost at this point, right?
We do, is an
They
estimate.
are
still know?
suggesting that $5,000
Okay.
would cover
I did
a
not see that.
feasibility study.
Okay.
5.
5,000?
Oh. I'll stop arguing.
That's not bad.
That's short money.
You know, slow and careful, that's okay.
No, that's fine.
Does anyone else have thoughts on the eligibility of the project? Today, we won't discuss the merits of it or whether or not we want the whole shebang, but whether or not we should invite them to come forward with a full application. If this is, as described, eligible, which I do believe it is an eligible project.
I as well agree that it is eligible, and I am thankful in the process that they're going through, the steps that they're taking so that we're not funding a whole project and then realizing after the fact that maybe parts of it can't be done. So it's very methodical and very precise, and this portion of it, I think in order to get to the final result, we need to do this. So I think it's a eligible project, and I could see it going forward.
I guess, for $5,000, I guess, it's worth it. In my mind, I can't say I read that whole document word for word, but, I've jumped through the stuff. I get into, first of all, because the building is so small, and the lot is so small, building a ramp on a hillside already, and trying to make a building like that ADA compliant, is that going to eliminate the period era accuracy of what the building is? If we had a much big, say, building the size of this room, and you want to make a bigger doorway, you kind of can do that. I haven't been in that building, but that building seems so small. But to make bigger doorways, now you really, as Jason questioned, is it going to become an issue that it's not gonna be period accurate anymore. And I mean, I think we should go ahead with the money and let the people, the historic commission, I guess, or whoever's responsible for it, address that issue. How can we be sure it's still period accurate? That would be my concern.
I can say that if, when and if they get to doing any restoration or any renovations, there will be guidelines, some of which were in that folder that they will have to follow. Both ADA guidelines, but also historic preservation guidelines. So I suppose a feasibility study will examine the rub between the two to see what is truly possible.
And there are situations where there's latitude that can be given, so
Yeah, I'm
that's
sure
what
there
we'll
is.
find out.
You know, but again, I mean, try to look at the lot as a whole. I mean, you know, I travel by that thing every day and I do look at it like, you know, what was it like back then? I
Well, it
kinda
was
ask
used,
myself.
it was used a lot, you know, when it was, before it was shut down because it wasn't ADA compliant. You know, students
But,
spent class time in
No.
there, so it,
see, we go back to the access to the building. I mean, we're gonna spend the $5,000. Then they're gonna come back and I'll make up some numbers. To do all of the other things, is it gonna cost us $25,000? Is it gonna cost us $100,000? And at that point, do we want to, how many people are gonna go and visit the building? Becomes the question, because like I said, there really is no parking there. You know, Irita Road, you'd have to park all the way up Irita Road would be the only possible parking area.
well, I guess that's a discussion we'll have to have when we get the results back, right?
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of, are people gonna come to visit the building? I mean, is that the whole intention in the first place? Are we just going to you know, this shoring the building up if it's caving in or something, I can understand, yeah, we wanna preserve the building. But if the expectation is to have people come and visit it, how many people are gonna come and visit?
Well, they can't visit it now, so,
True,
right? So we have to give them the opportunity to visit it, then, you know, if you build it, they will come.
yeah, but in this case, how many, are we gonna get
Well-
50 a year, 5,000?
I envision school field trips, probably a class at a time, you know, which would be, you know, one bus, drop them off, go off, come pick them up later. And, you know,
There will be many opportunities to
Yeah.
be able to utilize it, you know, besides Spirit or Shrewsbury or school programs. There's, the availability is there, so,
I figure there's a reason that it has stood the test of time and is still there now. And I am sure that there are ideas, and I would love to hear them for how it can be used and incorporated and continue to be part of the town's fabric.
Are there any other questions, comments towards the eligibility of a feasibility study?
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm going to just read the statement that the applicant put in here, and this is from the eligibility. It says, who will your project benefit? And the response is, residents in Shrewsbury will benefit, especially those who may experience accessibility challenges. ADA compliance will facilitate inclusive participation in public events such as the Spirit of Shrewsbury, other historically appropriate society-sponsored programs, as well as Shrewsbury's 300th anniversary celebration, which is going to come up in 2027, and the bicentennial celebration of the District 5 schoolhouse itself in 2028. So this, they were clear in terms of, you know, wanting to do this for public benefit and calling out these upcoming events. I believe that this is an eligible project to move forward.
Any other thoughts on eligibility? Is there a motion to approve eligibility and invite a full application?
so moved.
Second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Then it has passed, it is eligible, and we will invite them for a full application. Chris, we can get that correspondence out forthwith. We had other applications that were submitted that we spoke of last time, largely pertaining to athletic renovations and rehabilitation at the high school. And at this time, we're asked to not discuss the eligibility until they haven't formally submitted them as of yet. I did meet with our athletic director, Jay Costa, just to have him tell me about what he was doing. I told him the kind of information we're looking for, and he's going to work with the town manager and with Kevin Esposito, and they'll figure out what projects that they would like to come forward with us. So are there any other incomplete or pending ones, Chris?
Yeah, there's also the story walk from the library. So I believe they're putting those materials together currently, and so they're pursuing that December 22nd internal deadline where we're going to review all of the staff and department projects. There's also one that our office may be looking at. Still too early to really kind of dig into that one. But we are looking at a number of projects. So, again, kind of vetting those out. The December 22nd is that internal deadline to have we'll likely have eligibility and full applications for all of those staff projects. So at the January meeting, we're going to try to have a very quick turnaround, hopefully have them really well put together that, after that 22nd, that gives us a little bit of time to review them, get some revisions done if needed, and have them for the committee at their January meeting.
Does the cemetery project fall into that? Is that a staff project, or is that considered a Parks and Cemetery Commission project now?
Yeah, so that's that's another one. So we
So
have
that
the
would-
story walk and the headstones.
So that would be the same deadline as well?
Correct. Yep. So we'll be working with that to kind of finalize those as well. So again, so that January meeting will probably have a clearer picture of the kind of department recommendations. We can do the January, February meeting, and that leaves us still time to get on the warrant. So for me.
Please to remind them, ask them, beg them to be as complete as they can, because this is a committee that does take its responsibility very seriously. Folks walk around properties that are proposed, there are questions, and we want to make sure we have enough time to properly vet them.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Just an update on a housing project that we're working on. The Shrewsbury Housing Authority did pay for, we found the funds and reserves to pay for a survey at Elizabeth Gardens, and we have determined we have some land available. So we have gotten a quote to have some engineering work done, and it's about $15,000, so that would be potentially something that we would put forward, but we're trying to get funding from another source, specifically Affordable Trust, so that we could do that sooner rather than later, and then not wait until town meeting to get that approved, because it's $15,000. So it's a rather small ticket item, but we are working on some, and our vision is some potentially 4 to 5 duplexes at Elizabeth Garden, which would be hopefully family housing, is what we think we can do. We need engineering to confirm we can do it.
That would be great. I look forward to hearing more about that.
Can you remind me of the location, the street address of Elizabeth Gardens?
Elizabeth Street, which is off of South Quincy.
Thank you.
It's near the Coolidge School.
Yeah, one of those dead-end streets down by Coolidge.
Yeah, it's kind of from,
Conservation land?
I don't
Right.
believe there's conservation there, but I know that's why you
Find out,
asked me.
won't
We will, for sure. And that's
It's-
part of our, obviously why we want to do the engineering
Yeah.
as well.
it's literally before Coolidge if you're coming from Route 9.
Okay.
It's a secret.
I mean, it's not far from Jordan Pond,
Mm.
so there, if there's conservation over there, we don't know.
In fact,
But
the committee that was looking at the east side of Jordan Pond path also passingly referred to the possibility for a trail from the west side into that area, roughly, I suppose, where the current housing is, and that would probably serve the new housing as well. So that would, there's the potential for nice access to the
Yeah,
pond.
good.
And it would be 40B housing, too.
would be terrific.
4 to 5.
So Chris, is there anything else on that item? Right?
I do.
Yes.
Have all the folks that came to the workshop, have they been reached to inform them that, hey, you know, if you want to get something in, you gotta get moving on it?
So we didn't reach out to the list of people, as was included some of the ones that reached out after the workshop. You know, we've been in communication with them. So some of those projects have come forward. The ones that are in the folder kind of detail our communication, but in terms of proactively kind of pursuing projects, we really need the applicants to kind of have the motivation to follow those through, so.
I hope they do. They had some wonderful ideas. Yes.
I can understand about having an applicant kind of go through it, but at the same time, some of these applicants were looking for the committee's support and to understand, like, what do I do next? So, it's a chicken and egg kind of thing.
I know that evening there were emails given out, business cards given out, and certainly a number of offers formally in the workshop and afterwards that were happy to help, wanted to hear more. I'm not sure, I like to think we're approachable people. I'm not sure how much chasing we could or should do.
I'm thinking of that volleyball court request where they were asking for help to understand what do I do next. So
Did
it's,
provide some documentation and business cards. So I'm not sure, I mean, we can certainly follow up, but the onus is on the person with the idea.
So the volleyball courts, I do know that, and I think there's some communication in there as well. But I know Kevin Esposito worked pretty diligently with that project proponent to really kind of flesh out the scope of the project. I don't know specifically where that communication has landed, but it really kind of came down to, I think, the scope, the original idea of it and what's eligible under the CPA guidelines may not have really meshed, and it seems like it's kind of dropped off in terms of, you know, what could be done. But, you know, we remain, you know, our office, and I know Kevin Esposito is available to kind of discuss that further if there is interest. It's just, you know, we do need a proponent to kind of drive the bus on that.
I think a sticking point might have been the fact that their surface isn't, I mean, the surface is probably one of the big ticket items in the project, and if artificial turf is not CPA eligible, I would imagine that all weather playing surfaces are not.
Yeah, I think that there's challenges in getting the surface for the kind of types of events and volleyball events that were for certain leagues, and there's that kind of balance. It's difficult to strike between those two, is my understanding. Knowing very little about volleyball. But
Most of the locally, a lot of the outdoor leagues, I believe, are sand, which we have. Maybe not great sand, but we do have one sand court.
On
Yes.
another topic that related to that public meeting, there was a young woman who was a potential Eagle Scout and had an idea for a trail. And my impression is that she may have decided that that was not feasible. It was a really tough site that might have headed into some wetlands, and she may be looking for another spot. The Trails Committee is probably going to be in touch with her.
I hope she does.
Yeah,
She seems
yeah,
like
we'd
a
like to
young
see her.
person who can make stuff happen.
Yes, and you always need trails.
What else have we got? Any other inklings, or should we move on to the next item? The next item pertains to a great idea that our vice chair brought up earlier today about not being the only resident expert. But, there are a number of highly effective boards that when a new member comes on, they're given a new member orientation, or at least in my nonprofit world, a new member orientation, perhaps a binder of past meeting minutes and information so that they can hit the ground running. And I believe you had some ideas about how we could do that so that, when we have questions, it's quick. I mean, we know we've been told over and over again, it's on the website, look for the coalition website, but maybe to have something more readily available right in our fingertips and locally. What were you thinking?
Well, I mean, honestly, I just wanted to have an open discussion about what members are feeling in terms of, some members are longtime proponents of CPA and rode the train of the campaign, and some are new and, just coming from other committees. So I totally understand that there's a difference of time, energy into CPA and now CPC. So I'll just say that for what worked for me in the campaign leading up to CPA and going through the whole thing was really just looking through the coalition's website, reading it and over reading it and reading it again and reading it again, and things start to sink in. And so I know that some people come with different perspectives that they want to focus in on. Certainly, if you're a historic preservation, if you come from a historic commission, you're going to start diving into the historic preservation side of things. If you're coming in from Parks and Rec, you would pick up that mantle, or Concom, or housing, right? So there's expertise that you come in with your own background, and I look for, from my perspective, that you come to the table with that perspective, I know the regulations about playgrounds and safety, and so now there's an applicant that comes in with
Not a chance.
you know what I'm saying? Well, that or the cemetery side of the operations, just how that operates. But there's also a basis to just generally how does CPA work, and
Yeah.
I hope there's a way that everyone can train up to be knowledgeable in just CPA general, right? And I think that's the key thing that's missing. I feel that's missing, and I just wanted to hear that. What do you all think? New members.
No, I think coming into, look, I think I was on the Parks and Cemetery Commission for 6 meetings before they asked me to join this meeting, right? So, and they're a much different group, and they get a lot of presentations from the different departments that are giving them reports and stuff like that. And they're doing a great job over there as far as that goes. But I think this organization is totally different. I don't see anyone who works for the town here. I don't know. Do any of you work for the town? Well, we all are employees. We all are employees, right? We know that, right? We sign that. But, it's a different perspective, right? And, you're developing a framework of CPA and what to do and what are the rules and what works, what doesn't. And you're all been immersed in it. Bathed in it, right? Right?
Jason,
Right.
Yes.
Yes, you gotta mix it in the bathroom.
And now I'm coming along, and yeah, you're miles ahead, and I'm grateful for these schoolhouse things and these other things that I can kind of sink my teeth into more. You make a valid point as far as, wading into the CPA pool, so to speak, right? And yeah, I'm not there, right? And it's tough to get there, right? Because, I think I joined Parks and Cemetery as a passion of, let's get some money for parks, let's do something there, and CPA was, oh, wait, there's the money. Let's go over there, and see what we can do. Well, they kind of asked for a volunteer, and, they both looked at me, the other two gentlemen, so, yeah.
Voluntold?
Here I am. Well, I was interested. But yeah, I think it's tough. I think it's tough to become immersed in CPA. There's a lot. I almost think of like a checklist. Would be kind of a no-brainer when you kind of look at these things and a high level. But it gets into great nuances, right? With the fire truck, was that really, where can we take it? The safety regulations, do we have to get the Department of Transportation involved or this, or follow their regulations? And that goes, now you're looking at each individual project where you have to almost get way into it. And I'm not sure that, is that our responsibility? I can understand when you talk about, widening doors and you don't want to take away the architectural gem of the schoolhouse. That's perfect, but, do I have to know, if I lower the floor 1.5 inches, is it going to be load bearing for a wheelchair? I don't know, right? I don't, there's got to be lines drawn, right? And where you have to rely on other people or other expertise,
Yes.
in certain things.
Can I comment? So I agree with you. There's got to be a line, and even after 5 years of CPA, that some of us have kind of gone in process. I'm still asking questions. I'm still
I
asking
understand,
questions.
yeah, yeah.
And that's why I want that bat phone. I want that RFQ or the new assistant town planner. Hopefully, is coming on board. That's another topic to find out. But to really say, all right, we're not architectural experts,
Yeah.
right? We're not.
Yeah.
Gail, do you work? Do you get associated with the Department of Interior and know their
How many
guidelines
opportunities
inside and
do I
out?
have to do
No.
to work with that?
Right? So there's going to always be a level of detail that we're not going to be able to do, and that's why folks like in planning department, right? Planning board has to rely on consultants, right? To say, hey, you take a look at this. You're experts in the field. You tell me, what is this good or bad?
Yeah.
And I see that no different here.
Right.
But I think there's different grades of like, how much do I need to know in order to be successful in CPC? And those are the things I'd like to flush out through your help, saying, hey, what it's easier for me to say, like I can see where those things are, and so I can certainly, if you're okay with this, I can draft up what I think would be helpful things to understand. I like the idea of a checklist. I try to see if there's other CPCs that have like a handbook. Didn't find one. A lot of them actually had more like town manager issued handbooks about how a committee runs in general. Probably a lot of overkill, 100+ pages. So maybe that's too much. It didn't even go into the detailed CPC. So I'm thinking, how do you get past it? Like, what is CPA 101?
Right. Right.
Would you all see that as a useful resource if it were a binder that you could add to? Do you want paper? Do you want a file that we hope you can find in the Google Drive?
Well, either way, you can print the file, so it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Chris?
I just want to mention, so like, one of the resources that we use on some other boards, planning board, we do have kind of a new member packet that, actually was a physical packet back in the day, but now is just on the Google Drive that we provide them. And it's really kind of a living document, and it's an amalgamation of kind of what are the resources that a planning board stepping into the role needs to know. And I think part of that is gearing towards, and that we always try to refine it as we go, how much of like all of the open meeting law legislation, you don't want to drown a new member in all of this, information.
As
but
a new
do
member, you
need
go
it,
through, you go through some training, right, with all of that, the open meeting law and
Absolutely, right.
conflict of interest and things like that. Yeah.
Right, and so I think what we could look at, and maybe we look at developing a new member packet, and we can kind of try to refine what are the pertinent details for someone just starting on the committee, that like, here's the core principles you need to know, excerpts from our CPA plan, here's the key pieces, maybe an example application of, this is a review that we've done for the fire truck project, so you can see here are the steps.
Maybe a list of resources. If you're looking for our past applications, they're in this folder. And because sometimes it's not intuitive when someone else has labeled the folders. Once you're told, it makes perfect sense, but you might have to be told where to look the first time.
And that's, the wealth of information, you can always add links at the end, if people really want to get drowned in the information, you can give them links to everything at the end of it too, and that's typically what we do, is kind of a, here's all
Now-
the additional reading for
if I might just add here, these are all things that we're talking about, people who have identified themselves as wanting to be on this committee. I would like to take the stance that we need to have an outreach to people, just get them interested in the idea of it. And I think that having very casual, conversational, over coffee kind of things, where you say, this is a fun committee, let me tell you about it, and, talk and answer questions and just see if anybody's interested. None of us are going to live forever. This committee is going to go on one way or another, and we need to have people who have an interest and maybe start learning early on, maybe actually watch us on the video and know how it goes, and the things that are possible, things that are not possible. And I'm a conversationalist, and I'm ready to do this at any time. Coffee, everything, whole 9 yards, in my living room. Drag a few neighbors in. What the heck?
John, did you want to say something?
Well, again, me being a new member, hopefully I don't go too long. Jason, you're right. You were here from day one, and you've grown up with the process. So yeah, everybody looks to you in terms of being knowledgeable. But if you're saying to me you're still finding stuff out, I don't say that worries me. But just coming on the committee, I think the more I find out, the more I read, the less I find out I know, is the problem. There's just so much information out there. Where do I turn next in terms of trying to understand the process? I guess I've gotten through where you get, we get a document, people fill it out, and, you look at it. But even understanding from the coalition side, I printed out and read the general law itself, chapter 44B. Like you said, I must have read that 5 times before I think I really understand. I'm not sure I totally understand it, but, I feel pretty good about it now. And then, obviously, there was the document, the informational guideline release, too. That goes into a lot of detail, and that's a document you have to read almost sentence. You read a sentence and you stop and you think about it. You read another sentence and you stop and you think about it. Because, again, they're trying to cover all the possible bases. So what are they really trying to tell me? If you really want to get that deep into it, it does become a lot of effort. And like I said, the more I find out, the less I feel like I know. But do we put a checklist of where do we go first? Understand the form, I guess. I'm making it up as I go, do this. Here are the basics. You can always get to read the general laws when you get time, read the informational guidelines, and then, the coalition, again, that's just like, trying to look at the galaxy, I guess, in terms of information. I don't really have a good answer as to what you should do, A, B, C, D. And, in my career, working and doing projects and stuff, I've always prided myself in like locking things down and so everybody knows how to row the boat in the right direction. There's a lot of information here, a lot of information. For somebody that's doing it part-time, basically, I guess, or as a sideline. So you just gotta keep digging.
Yeah, no, this document was good, right? So I've read through this one, this helped a lot, right? But I think it gives you a base
Yeah,
for going forward, right? But it doesn't get into the same depth, I think, when you're researching to make sure a project meets certain guidelines.
Yeah, there's a bunch of little quirks in the CPC laws too, like no AstroTurf. I mean, who would have thought of that?
An amendment that was passed later to the law.
Yeah. But, yeah, little things like that can really trip you up if you don't know about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, both Jason and John, all of you have mentioned things that I was thinking about, but Going back to the beginning of time, currently, there's like 5 of us that have been in the beginning of this whole thing and have learned the process and learned about CPA through lots of different avenues. And one of them that I remember was very beneficial in the whole process was the coalition's workshops like that they presented to us, where they, was Stuart's assistant, I forget his name, but
Jace.
Jace. He, they put on these video presentations on CPA, and it was very helpful to understand the whole concept of CPA, how it works, could ask questions. And maybe that's something the coalition has done with other groups or other committees. Maybe they could put together some kind of a CPC 101 for beginners, so that, to get people up to speed as to what our role is and how you go about doing it. As Jason said, we're learning every time you open the book, look at a piece of paper, you're learning something new, and there's just no way we're ever gonna be able to catch up and know it all. So we have to kind of rely on each other. Like you said, everybody brings something to the table, so maybe we have to kind of divide up and conquer by, historical preservation, these are the things you should be tuned into, or conservation, that's what you should be tuned into. You should be looking at these things.
Yeah.
Maybe that would help, I don't know. But maybe the coalition can put something together, or maybe they have something that's available, a little outline or something that they have.
I can certainly ask them, yes.
So thank you for the reminder, because actually, I know they had video, we had, videos, but I wonder if they recorded it, if they kept it.
Yeah, I
So if
think
it's
it
already
was
available,
recorded.
then that's
Right.
like, hey, let's just get the link on, share the link and everyone watch the video and refresh ourselves on that. Because they did a wonderful, I forgot that they did a wonderful job about just giving the CPA 101, but at the really rudimentary, the basic of those basics.
CPA for dummies.
And then, there's always more to learn, right? So like if you're financially focused on it, you can just spend, spend a good morning reading the 75-page IGR about how the financials work for CPA. But maybe not everybody wants to do that.
think it's
Or
necessary.
need to.
I don't think it's necessary for all of us to know as much as we can. I think if we focus as much as we can on our individual desires, like if it's financial, then this is a go-to guy for financial, right? If it's something other, it's a go-to guy for that. Maybe that's how we help each other. But as far as new members coming on board, I feel your pain, because I can imagine it must be overwhelming to like sit here and think, what am I doing? It's like, where am I going with all this? It's a
No,
lot
it
to
it
absorb all
isn't.
at
You
once.
you absorb it and you take in what you can.
Right.
You try to contribute where you can. But it comes down to, I think, getting past the application and this booklet, helped, right? Because you were all very immersed in that, right? And getting to the projects has been, better.
Yeah, I guess my feeling is I've been to 4 or 5 meetings. It seems like very few projects are gonna be cut and dried. Because everyone, go back to the fire truck, everyone has its own idiosyncrasies in terms of how it fits into the program.
We'll keep asking questions, like Gail said, use each other's expertise. If that video is available, if you can find out, that would be tremendous for everyone. And if you find a good resource, if there's a particular part of the coalition website that you think is useful, share it.
So I made a folder for the January meeting, and in that I put a new member packet folder. It's empty right now, but as we come across materials that we can do, we just throw them right in there, and that'll be easier to.
Can I get to it?
You should be. It should be accessible by everyone. So, but if you have trouble accessing it, I'll send it out at the end of this meeting. If you have trouble accessing it, we'll fix that
Yes.
well in advance.
I'd like to take an action to create a draft from my perspective, just think what would be like the 101, 102 course of CPA, and then obviously there's always going to be advanced courses that people take for historic preservation, et cetera, but at least want to just get to that. What's the most basic crux that you should know? Like for example, if there's a video is available, great. Watch this video, then print out the allowable use chart and put that on your wall and memorialize that, because that is the key of what we do. That and our bylaw. So, if you'd
If you'd be willing, that would be tremendous. Thank you.
Thank you.
You are so charged. Is there anything else about that before we move on to signage? We've been speaking about signage, we've been hoping about signage, and it would be great to have some when some shovels hit the ground. So Chris, what do you have for us?
Yeah, so we went through again and you know, not to beat the horse of this Community Preservation Coalition website, but they do have a gallery of a lot of kind of signage that other communities have done. I think what's most notable out of those, if you look at them, is there's a number of them that are, very much permanent signs that are very project specific, detailing what the project is on the sign itself, other funding sources that were involved. There's also a number of the projects that are very generic and look like they're probably temporary in nature in terms of putting them up for a little bit, for a year or so. They're a little bit more substantial than kind of the campaign signs, if you will, but certainly temporary in nature, where they go up and then be taken away at a later time, or reused for some other signage. So I think there's two opportunities there, and in terms of our contracts, we do write in the contracts once they receive funding through town meeting, that they do have to develop a plan for signage that includes CPA language where feasible, and so as projects kind of develop that, their final products will look for those opportunities to memorialize it. And I think that's the opportunity for more of the permanent signs being included in the project budget, not really necessarily out of the 5% administrative budget. But we may want to look at also an option for those more temporary signs that, as a project is ongoing. I think that was another kind of discussion item that the committee was talking about, is having, as the project's ongoing, or if it's about to happen or up for discussion at town meeting, that we're able to kind of put that up. And so I think that's, if we look at a more of a generic kind of design, we can look at that. So I don't know if there's certain design elements that, we'd want to see in a sign, if it's that kind of generic CPA funds, things that we like or don't like, but we can start, I'm happy to kind of work with staff and develop a kind of draft signage proposal. I don't know if we have to really get into the weeds of a full kind of signage company at this time, but we can do like a draft.
Give us a great gallery if folks have a chance to look through it, with a lot of different examples. I will admit, I really like the Hanover CPA Funds at Work sign, something like that, that would be next to the playgrounds when they're hopefully being renovated, or the basketball courts.
You want to share your screen?
That one.
Sure.
So CPA Funds at Work.
Yeah, I guess, my opinion would be.
Is this temporary?
Yeah, that
This
looks.
is a temporary sign?
That's a temporary one. And I think it's two things that want to be determined. Certainly what product is purchased. And like we said, we don't have anything permanent yet, but something that is like a campaign sign for something that won't be in process very long, and something that's more permanent, but it's probably the product is something that you could explore, Chris, but the content is what I think we should have opinions on. So that's the one on the right that I like, the wording, CPA Funds at Work. So I think it will help for the community to see what their CPA funds are doing.
Right.
We could put it on the website, we could talk about it, but they need to drive by it on their way to work.
I personally think that every project should have some type of permanent recognition, whether it be a plaque if it's a smaller thing, or a bigger sign if it's a bigger project. But maybe I'm being a little overkill, but I think this committee should have some oversight as to what it looks like and what it says, rather than just having it be up to the applicant or the project to just put it up. I think there should be some type of a say that, yeah, this is appropriate for that site. And I don't think it should be a generic permanent sign. I think that each sign should fit the project, because every project is different, and the sign should be appropriate to the project. But I'd hate to see something go up with our name on it that we haven't okayed. You know, like a CP, this was funded by CPA money, CPC committee money, or whatever, however you want to phrase it, and then not have it be an appropriate sign that represents the project. So maybe there could be some oversight from
Yeah,
your department and us.
I'd have to go back to the specific language, but certainly the intent of, when they develop the signage proposal would be to share that with the committee for their kind of input, and design. And I know I'd be willing to kind of share some thoughts on it as well. I mean, I think the signs that are on the CPA website, I agree. I think Hanover and Gloucester's are pretty, nice aesthetically. I think it depends upon the project, as you mentioned. I think there's some that I can't stand, that are shown on here. Sorry, Belchertown, but really don't like that.
Belchertown likes signs with a lot on it. If you've ever gotten off the turnpike at the Palmer Belchertown exit, it's just almost a city block of little signs for everything, every which way.
You mean like the one
It's
looking
their
at
thing.
that?
It doesn't
Yeah,
have to be ours.
We'll say maybe it was the right choice for that specific
It's their
project.
thing. It definitely does not have to be ours.
But yeah, certainly I think we can look at how we design those to.
Chris, is there a Shrewsbury style at all?
So if we wanted to do branding similar to like the town website, the strategic plan, which I think would be beneficial, we do have a design palette, specific colors that would be used, and fonts and that sort. And so I can work with our kind of design experts in the town manager's office to to develop that.
Well, it seems to me that, we might as well be consistent. I haven't seen this, and I may hate it, but,
Yeah, and I mean, certainly we can look at utilizing that, or if we want to do if we want to define our own kind of design features, we could use that as a template to create our own if we wanted to do a similar design palette to say, the signage will include these specific colors for our, or it could, be as simple as adding a seal to it.
Kathy?
Initially, that was my feeling as well, that we should have a consistent sign so people start to recognize it as CPA. And then I started looking at your samples, and now I think it's more important that it goes with the project. And for example, the sign at Camp Wanagon is gonna look a lot different than the one at the playground at Arrowwood. So I've changed my mind on that. I think it should be
What do you
for
think,
example.
what's your opinion on having that a permanent sign would affect the project, but for in progress, we have one
Yeah, because then we
in
can just buy
progress
10
sign?
of them or however and recycle them. So I think for sure that can be just a temporary one. But I think the permanent one should be, for example, the playground that they have in here. It would look funny if we had, I love Concord sign, but that would look funny on Camp Wanagon.
Yeah.
So I think that tree farm one, that's perfect because it goes with the project.
Yeah.
But for the temporary one, then yes, I think we should buy 5 of them, 10 of them, and then we just recycle them and then buy 10 more when we need them.
I guess my input, actually, I've given this a lot of thought, and this past month, my wife and I spent a few days up in York, Maine, just taking a few days off. And York is kind of a historical town. So riding around town, I'm looking and saying, geez, they had signs everywhere, which I thought was interesting. actually, I took some pictures, and maybe I should pass them to you so you can load them up. But in looking at the signs, yeah, I'm coming to that, no one sign fits all, number one. Number two, yeah, I think there should be some type of a statement, we should eventually draft and agree on funds provided by CPA or something like that, that has to be on all the signs. Then looking at the signs, I look at two different kinds of signs. Number one being the property on Grove Street. That's a drive-by sign. I'll use that term, versus Camp Waukegan, where the sign would probably be in the parking lot. That's you park, you stop, and you read a standing still sign. The drive-by sign obviously can't have a lot of information on it because you're driving by and it's bang, it's there and it's gone. Whereas Camp Waukegan, we can write a small book because somebody can stop and, read a sign. So in that sense, I think you need to have two different types of signs, just those two generically. What am I going to read and what am I going to drive by? And then from there, try to determine a type of sign. We look at the all access. You see the posts go up behind the sign. They're much higher versus the tree farm. You just have signs that are standing up. The point being, there were signs that had a granite, that I've got. You got, two granite pillars and a sign is built in. Yeah, there were some signs, and I think there was one in here where a plaque was put on a stone. Even in York, I found some engraved in the stone, that type of thing. You start, again, you don't give it a thought until you start looking and you say, geez, all these signs are so different. Then you had, let's call it engraved lettering, recessed lettering. Then some had raised lettering on them. So I think if we're gonna decide, we ought to look at, in terms of being consistent, do we want, the raised lettering? And the whole sign doesn't have to be, let's say, recessed lettering. Use the J. Cox Tree Farm. Some of the signs I saw, the headline was basically engraved, like, I'm sure it wasn't gold leaf, but it was kind of a gold paint, and then the rest of the sign was just written on the sign, let's say. But something, the Camp Waukegan, boom. Do you want to have a big lettering, recessed, or raised? And then the rest of the sign can be whatever you want. So, like I said, driving around town, and there's all kinds of stuff up there. Some of the parks that they've got, they get signs for everything. So-and-so donated this land to the town, Some of them obviously are right on the waterfront, which make it look really nice. So,
It'd be great if you could share those pictures with Chris.
yeah, I
So
will.
you could add those to this collection, take a look and see what people like.
So in that sense, and again, I'm not in favor of any particular sign. I'm just, like I said, as I started, you saw a sign, you say, oh, this looks neat, and then you saw the next, as you go down the signs, it's like, geez, it's so different.
Possibilities are endless.
Yeah. Other than, I guess, I think we need a drive-by sign standard and a readable sign standard.
You need a certain small number of samples for people to go by,
Yeah.
right? You don't want 30, right? 3 to 5.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have to weigh in on the big topic of the night. I'm of the opinion that the proponent of the project should have the drive the sign and what it looks like that fits the project best. And I think CPC should only state, here are two pieces of language to use, and leave it up to the proponent to determine the best application of that. So, for example, on the screen right now, it says text funded by name of town, Community Preservation Act, right? And there's other examples where they say funded by CPA monies, or CPA funds.
Yeah.
If we give a long version and a short version of the text, there's at least consistency available with two options, and from what we want to communicate, we're just a small portion of that project. We're just the money, maybe even just a portion of the money. So the project itself should take the credit and should take the front of what they want to show, and we should just, I believe we should just provide the text that we want to communicate that is consistent in either a long format or a short format. And I think we call that a day for the permanent signs. The temporary signs, yeah, that's all us, right? Because the project is funded by that. And honestly, I think Madam Chair, you provided an example. I think we just let town staff kind of run with that idea, come up with a proposal, and just come back. Because I think we're going to be in a kind of a multiple round cycle talking about designs.
And our
for
first
temporaries.
priority is probably the temporary one, because we don't yet have a completed project. But let's
Yeah.
get something by those shovels in the ground. And to your point, a drive-by sign, perhaps something like CPA at work is, that's what you see first, and then a little bit more. But please do feel free to share your pictures, John. It'd be great to see those. And if anybody wants to go through these examples and send Chris your thoughts, please feel free to. But let's get some signs and something that'll stand out on the snow. Because I hope we'll have snow. I know that's an unpopular opinion, but I like snow. So what's next? We are hoping that our January meeting, we expect to have a very full agenda. Are there other items that should be on that agenda? I mean, it sounds like we're going to have our hands full with, I hope, eligibility applications as well as possible. What we will do is we will handle all of the eligibility applications. We'll see what we get, but it would make sense to determine eligibility first, and then we'll consider an application. Typically, when we've had the applications, the applicant has been here to speak to it. By compressing it, it makes it a little bit more difficult. Perhaps if we know how many we'll have, we might choose to break it into two. I would hate for someone to have to sit through 2 hours of a meeting, because we're not quick, before we can even get to their eligibility. In general, there aren't a lot of questions to ask the applicant about eligibility. Either the project is eligible or not, and then we can move on to their application. But will they be prepared to make presentations at that time? Should we simply ask on the full application, should we simply review, ask pertinent questions, and then schedule them to come back for applications? Because I don't think a 3-hour meeting makes sense for anyone. It's not fair to the applicants and certainly not fair to all of you. Does anyone have suggestions, ideas?
Just point of clarification, are you saying then that at the next meeting, if the number 5 schoolhouse full application has been submitted, that we are not going to review that and vote on
We
it?
should, but if we have
Why can't we
8 or
do that
10,
first?
we tried once to get through 9 in one night, but that was just the application, not the eligibility application.
But if they've already been eligible, declared
they're
eligible,
eligible.
can't we do that first so that they can move forward and, I mean,
They will be invited.
Fine.
Chris and I should send something out tomorrow to let them know that they have been deemed eligible and we
Right.
welcome their full application.
right, okay.
But how many are we gonna have? January 22nd.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of the question. I mean, I think we'll see how that review after the 22nd goes, in terms of if it pares down any projects. I think it's likely that we'll have most of those going forward. Likely to, with some additional review. But yeah, I think what I would propose is that I think at the January meeting, at the very least, we can go through eligibility of each of those. I think that's a smaller kind of hurdle for the committee to take on. We've done the certainly done the eligibility for the schoolhouse phase 2, so we can invite them. They'll certainly be an application for review. And then we can even just put it subject to time that, we may, the applications, if they're submitted on time, we may hear the applicant, or we may just have some, draft questions and say, invite you back for the February meeting to do a full presentation and any of the questions that we kind of noted, or hold off till February on anything. But
I would suggest that, I know you send out our materials, if you receive applications on the 22nd, that's going to be a Friday before Christmas isn't going to probably be a long day at the office, I hope. But as soon as you have them submitted, if you can put them in the folder and let us know that they're there, so folks would have an opportunity to review them earlier than Thursday or Friday before the meeting. That
Yeah.
we can come prepared with questions and use our applicants' time as well as our own.
right. So I'll certainly do that. Oh, sorry.
How?
No, should we plan to potentially have a second meeting in January?
We might,
Okay.
right, need to, of course, January, we have a holiday we have 2 Monday holidays in January. So we can maybe hold the 2 open Mondays in January, 'cause that's all we've got.
Do we have to have it on a Monday?
That's typically when the room is available, but certainly Chris can look and see if there are other days.
In terms of having multiple meetings, is that because we're gonna crawl through the eligibility requests with the people? Which, like, we start asking questions, I can see, even like with the fire engine, that took like a half an hour to 45 minutes for one request. So,
I do believe we can determine eligibility with greater expediency than we have historically. Is that a diplomatic way of saying it? If we focus on, is this eligible or not, we can make that determination much more simply, I think, than we have in the past, if we
but
commit
once we
to sticking
determine,
to the
say,
topic.
it's eligible, then they come back with the proposal.
Well, Chris is telling us that we're getting both the eligibility request as well as the applicant at the same time. That's new this year. Last year, there were separate deadlines. Last year, there were deadlines.
You say we can be more expedient, but usually if we start asking questions, like even on the schoolhouse, in terms of, there's a lot of questions. All I'm getting at, and, I'm just throwing this out, I'm not saying we should do it. If we're gonna take, say we get 5 or 6 requests, and we're gonna take at least a half an hour per request, like the finance committee used to do a Saturday, we do the budgets. 2 Saturdays, we do 8 to 4 when we did the budgets.
Oh, God.
Well, the point is, do we
It's the town budget.
She's melting right now.
do we do from 9 to 1 or something to get through this?
Absolutely
Are
not.
we gonna come back every Monday for 4 Mondays in a row
I
to
sure
get through
hope
the
not.
thing?
I believe we could simply set an agenda with the eligibility requests, assuming we get the number that we think we're going to, that we could invite the number 5 schoolhouse to come and present their project and discuss their project as a whole. If they're ready with their application, we should be ready to hear it. And the others that are choosing to do it all at once, we could simply ask them we will consider their eligibility request at our next meeting. And then those that are eligible, we will invite to come back for either a later January meeting or a February meeting.
Yeah, so, I think the basis is the intent for this internal review is to have all of the materials for each of these projects to the committee for that January meeting. Whether or not they take, however long it takes the committee to review those, that's the purview of the committee, and that's understood, I think. So really, we're gonna have the materials to you for that January meeting, and if we need you know, all the way to the March meeting to review those. If we need to split that up because of the volume, we can do that. We can certainly put them on the agenda and receive preliminary comments or a preliminary presentation and say, we're not ready to comment on this. Thank you for the presentation. You know, we'll review for next month, and those will remain online for the committee to review, you know, in their own time as well. So we will have 3-4 months to review these materials for eligibility and application.
Any other thoughts?
Yes.
Yes.
So I don't envision the timeline you just described, 3 or 4 months, because if we're already getting to January, don't we have to have like, it wasn't like early March?
And
we
it
had
was
to have the
March, we
warrant.
had to
Yeah.
have it to the finance committee recommendation, so if we, but we could simply, our next meeting, if the full application for the District 5 schoolhouse is available, we can consider that and invite them to present. And then the other projects first determine their eligibility. Because obviously if it's not eligible, we're not going to consider the application even if they wrote it. It's eligible or not. And we could certainly just keep that to our agenda. It's that, as John pointed out, we took quite a while with one eligibility. That would fill an evening. And then February, we choose at the end of that, depending on what we've got for the eligibility, we can make the determination that night to vote to hold a second meeting in January, or vote to just continue our own due diligence, ask questions, and be ready to hear presentations and vote in February. Yes.
Would it make sense with every eligibility application to do a preliminary vote? Do we feel this is eligible, yes or no? And if everyone here agrees it is, then we just move on and we don't discuss it at all because it meets the requirements. And we will
That's
know
what
it
I'd
meets the
like to do in the
requirements.
January meeting.
And then if there's any discussion, go to discussion. So we don't have to discuss every single one. Even, like on this one, I think everyone was in agreement, this met our requirements.
Right,
So we could have just voted and not talked about it for a half hour.
yes, we could have. I agree. If we can keep it, we get excited to see these projects, but it is simply yes or no, it's eligible or not.
Or let's discuss.
Right.
Because it could be you do have questions, but some will be a slam dunk and we could just yes and move on.
I'm certain we can get through the eligibility requirements as well as hear a presentation of the District 5 schoolhouse and discuss their application. What I'm not certain is if we would have time to then discuss the other applications, because we don't yet know how many of them we will deem eligible, and I would hate to ask somebody on the fly ready to give us a presentation.
Well, I don't think it's fair for the people that have followed the process either, you know, going through the eligibility process to do both of them at once. I mean,
But they're choosing to do that evidently.
well, yeah, but that's not how was
Well-
established, you know,
Yeah, but
which brings up the point is, to consider in the future, is this rolling process really working? Or do we go back to specific deadlines so people know, look, I have to have it in by this time? It's not like on the fly, whenever I feel like getting it done. Something, I mean, we tried it one way at the beginning, and now we tried a second way, so is there a happy medium, or do we scratch one and go back to the other, or?
I think
Not
we'll have
sure
a
the
lot of
rolling is
information
working.
and some experience having done it both ways, that come May and June, we've got a lot to talk about and
Yeah.
figure out what is the best. And Carl will, we'll have
Well,
one.
you know, it's just that we had the, kind of the open house, the meeting where everyone showed up, and, you know, we kind of said to them, hey, we'll help you, Get it in as early as possible, and we'll help you. Now I'm hearing, to a certain degree, right, that a number of town departments are gonna submit all kinds of requests, right? And we're gonna be inundated in January. And those public people, non-town members or non-town employees, you know, are we gonna leave them aside? Or are we still going to help them?
We'll help anyone that asks.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying, right? Because you're suddenly like worried about being inundated, and I get it, right? There's suddenly cash available, right? And the town departments have been starved for projects they want to do for years, right? Look,
So,
I'm on the
I-
playground, right? So those playgrounds are not great, you know? And so, you know, they see money and they want to do their projects, their little pet projects, and I get it. But, you know,
No,
we have these other people from the town that want their own
I
projects.
think I need to frame that a little bit differently. I think the intent of the internal reviews is specifically not to conflict with potential for public projects. In fact, I would probably recommend that those would take some precedence over staff projects and department projects to some extent. Really, what we're looking at, and that was part of it, is I think the way we've written it is that community projects can go all the way up until, you know, for a project that's well put together, if they have the eligibility in the application right prior to the warrant, they could submit it and the committee can hear it and vote on it. We did the rolling application for that case. The intent of the internal is to make sure that, you know, both for community projects, resident-driven projects that have been suggested to date, that we're not kind of utilizing, you know, we're not competing with staff projects in that regard, and we're appropriately prioritizing those. And similarly, it's to make sure that we can go through and vet in terms of the projects that departments are looking at, both, you know, how is this in relation to our own municipal budgeting and capital projects? How is this in relation to other grants that the community is pursuing, to make sure that, again, we're not competing with other funds that are available and that we're allocating the funds that we're pursuing through CPA appropriately. And so I think that's the intent of doing it this way. And that's why I do think that I understand the committee feeling that they may be inundated for the January meeting, and maybe we need to look at this timeline, you know, and maybe back that up further in the next round from a department step. But really, the intent is to make sure that, you know, by the January meeting, we should have a really well vetted, put together applications that we hope will answer many of the questions and may be those slam dunk projects. There may still be questions. I don't think we're going to anticipate everything, but really, these should be really well vetted and really well put together of what we're looking to do with this funding. So,
We have hardly mentioned, even in passing, the Tombstone project, which strikes me as being well, you know, I mean, all it needed was the form filled out. They had the whole report. We could have looked at, I looked at it. It seems to be pretty straightforward. I think they, you know, unless there's something I'm not seeing, that they should go right ahead and just be approved as soon as we get all their paperwork. Maybe this is a little premature, maybe I shouldn't say it, but, you know, it looked like straightening Tombstone, you know, filling, you know, you probably looked at it, right? So, you know what I'm talking about.
I haven't seen the report, have
You
I?
have it? Oh,
I did. I did.
yeah, I saw the report. You know, it was like one tombstone after another, and it was like most of them were just being straightened out and, you know, or had a, you know, repair or something. I don't think anything was really that dramatic, or, do you recall anything?
Not off the top of my head, but
No, but it was-
it did seem like an extensive report. I'm kind of surprised it didn't come up in tonight's agenda, but yeah,
If it
I
hasn't
think,
been submitted, I'm not sure how we put it on the agenda.
It was, I think there were 74 tombstones.
Did you see there's 400 pages of that, over 400 pages of that report.
yeah,
I
I
don't think,
didn't read everything.
I don't think we got all 400 pages.
But the report has
But we
been
haven't
submitted and
received
there's.
any
Huh?
submission from them
If I have to read it up in half.
for funding. So while we fix it, they haven't submitted anything.
No, they haven't, but I think the fact that the report is there and it's comprehensive and it seemed like it was poised to take the next step, it would be good to have it in the back of our heads.
Yeah, it'd be
also
great
was-
if they would submit it.
Yeah.
Be happy to
It-
look at it.
it is in the
Working on it.
pending projects, the gravestone restoration.
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah. So that is one of the pending projects that we're anticipating in January.
So is the holdup that they're trying to figure out how much it's gonna cost, or what?
Just that internal review, again, making sure that we're allocating those funds in terms of other funding sources and.
So that's one that the town also is holding on to right now. Okay,
It's
so
it's
it's
in the
not a
folder, so
private
you guys
citizen
can
for us to-
review it
yeah.
as a pending, but they have not formally submitted it because we're still looking at that internal review of
Oh,
all department projects for the January meeting. But the materials that have been submitted to date are in draft form, and they're under that incomplete and pending projects.
okay, so they're pretty close.
Madam Chair?
Okay.
My
Well, I won't
my
say any
last
more then.
comment is that I think it's the obligation of this committee to do our due diligence on every project and review them. And if it takes more time than we would like, then that's how it is. There's always a fall town meeting, and if some things have to be postponed till the fall town meeting, then that's how it goes. But I think it's more important that we review each case clearly, financially, whether it's eligible, whether it's appropriate, and sometimes that takes time, and to rush through it, I would be very uncomfortable, just to get it through on one or two meetings if it takes longer. So that's just what I have to say. I'd rather take as much time as it takes and let the process be what it is, and it be on the warrant when it gets on the warrant.
That's why the onus is on folks to get their information in,
I'll second.
get the
What's
applications,
the
you know.
rush?
It's like in school, if you don't turn in your homework,
That's
the
right.
teacher can't give you a grade.
The one, if I'll go down her path and say a final comment that I have. My concern is, first of all, it's a new program. I mean, if we stopped people on the street and asked them if they knew what the preservation funds and acts were, we probably won't get more than 10 or 20% of the people in town that say, oh, I know what that is, and everybody's gonna say they don't know. So, in terms of individuals coming to us, I don't think a lot of people are aware that this type of fund is available. On the other side of that coin, the town is coming forward to, let's say, make a bunch of proposals. I don't know what, they're gonna come forward, and we would go to a town meeting, money will get spent, it'll get in the papers that the Preservation Fund is giving out money, all town projects. And I think my concern is people are gonna get the impression that is for the town only, and it's not me, the individual, can show
I'm
up
gonna
with a
interrupt you
project.
right there for one thing. 'Cause Chris, some of these projects that are under the town review are there because it's a privately suggested, a citizen has suggested it, but it's on town land. And so the town has to be a co-sponsor if the town owns the property. And so there are
Okay.
some, they are individuals.
I'll interrupt you now.
Okay.
You can't
The math behind it, you're accurate with the math behind it, but the person on the street doesn't see the individual's name, they see the town of Shrewsbury running the project. That's my whole point. So somewhere, not only we, I think it has to, more information has to get out there that anybody in the community can show up if they got a decent idea, can ask for funds. Now, from a proposal standpoint, Northborough has a preservation committee. Does Westborough and Grafton have them too?
Grafton
I mean,
does.
why wouldn't either the 4 chairs or 4 representatives, one from each town, get together? I would push the community advocate, because everybody reads the community advocate pretty much. Get out there, put a big feature article and emphasize it's for individuals, basically. At some point along, not tomorrow, but, some point, we just started out, in all fairness, and we got a few people. I think in 2 or 3 years, we're probably gonna be getting inundated with requests as people start to find out about
I hope so.
it. Yeah, I mean, I would hope so too.
Our workshop was a nice indication that some people, we were starting to hear more, and obviously some of those folks have either chosen that they're going to do something else, or they're still figuring out their project, but we did have a nice turnout for that, which was gratifying. It was a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, where does, somewhere along the line, it gets stamped on people's foreheads that they know about this, I guess is my question.
That might take us more than 1 or 2 years, I suspect.
You're right, but we as a committee should try to make sure we build on that going forward.
Absolutely. And literally, your drive-by sign, I think, will help. When
Yeah.
people see shovels in the ground or a backhoe or
Yeah.
at Dean Park and they see CPA funds at work, that will be a step in the right direction.
Because then, even if they don't know, then it's like, I mean, what does CPA mean? You know, then they start
Well, we're
looking it
gonna
up.
put the website on the signs,
So-
right?
Anyway,
That's a good
that's,
idea.
like I said, that's my final comment.
Is there anything else from folks? We will keep you posted as Chris gets more information.
Yes. So we've been kind of, we haven't had a consistency in terms of the project reviews and having them open to the public for comments. So I'd like to see us, I'm proposing we go back to ensuring that we promote and be clear on the agenda that it is open for public comments when it comes to the time to having the project reviewed.
By February.
Yeah, so any project that's gonna be reviewed, like, let's say, as you were commenting, the District 5 schoolhouse, if they're ready and you deem it ready, that would be a public comment for that project. But we don't have public comments for eligibility.
No.
Right, so, first year, we really formalized it, and I don't think it's not a requirement of the CPA legislation that we have public hearing, but that's where we originally started. We had a public notice in the paper to say, hey, these projects, but that was when we had like really concrete dates. But now with this ongoing process and the fact that, we had a couple of projects already without that kind of broadcasting the public comment, I think we'd be better served community-wise to say this is open for public comment and have that advertised in our normal channels of
We
communication.
could advertise at the next meeting, there's public comment on the District 5 schoolhouse project. Only that project.
Yeah.
We could do that if we want to fully, we should have time. Presumably before then, they will be able to submit that application. Let's see what they say about if they would be ready to submit their full application in advance. Let's give them a chance to decide if they're ready. And if they are, we could certainly invite public comment at that January meeting on that one application. If they do their presentation and have public comment.
Would be, will be authorizing notice of applications to be heard, like the District 5 in the community advocate. We can expend that through the administrative funds, or are we holding off on that at this time?
So
We don't have enough.
I was just saying that there was no, we went that route. I feel like we went too far in having to like formalize it, in my opinion. I haven't seen it really. The only thing that I believe the CPCs have to do from a public notice perspective is the annual needs assessment, which is like April. So I think this is really in how we want to just formalize a policy. I would advocate not to do a public notice, but just rather ensure that the agenda calls out public comment is open for this particular agenda item, however you see fit, Madam Chair. Right, but for the projects themselves, the applicant project, application review.
That would make sense. So let's talk to the District 5 schoolhouse folks tomorrow. See if they think they would be ready, and we'll go from there. So, and that's being December 4th, I get to wish you all very, very happy holidays and see if there is a motion to adjourn.
So
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much for all of your work. in